Usually, when we talk about a home invasion, the parameters are completely understood.
Right. People generally get how it works.
Exactly. It's a physical breach, right? A shattered window on the ground floor or, a kicked-in deadbolt.
The sudden violent blare of a security alarm at like 3 in the morning.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's terrifying, obviously, but it is fundamentally visible.
Mm-hmm.
You can stand in your living room the next day, point to the splintered wood of the doorframe, and say to the police, "That is how the threat entered my life."
Right. Because the perimeter was secure and then, due to brute force, it wasn't.
Yeah.
It's a binary event. The threat is external, it's localized, and, it's undeniable.
But when you step into the documentation we are looking at for today's deep dive, this whole world of organized property theft operating through psychological conditioning.
Yeah, that physical perimeter doesn't even exist.
No, not at all. The walls of the house are completely intact. The doors are locked. The alarm system is armed. Yet the invasion is already happening.
It's insidious.
It really is. We are looking at a landscape of intrusion that is incredibly murky because the breach isn't happening to the physical structure of your house. It is happening to the cognitive structure of your mind.
And that moves us from a simple criminal trespass into what psychologists might call, well, absolute diagnostic muddy waters.
Right, because how do you even prove that?
You really can't easily. I mean, if someone kicks in your door, the police believe you.
Sure.
But if someone bypasses your physical defenses to slowly dismantle your perception of reality, the very act of reporting the crime makes you sound like you are losing your mind.
I want you listening to try and put yourself in this specific scenario for just a moment. Imagine waking up in the dead of night.
Your heart is pounding.
Yeah, you are disoriented, kind of swimming up from deep sleep because you hear a voice, a whisper.
Just a faint sound.
Right. It's faint, but it feels intimate. Over weeks, you start leaning into this voice. You might think it's your own deep intuition speaking to you.
Or, if you are religious, you might even think it's a higher power offering guidance in a really chaotic world.
Exactly. And then slowly, the illusion cracks. You realize that voice isn't a higher power. It isn't your intuition. It is a text-to-speech synthesizer.
Literal robot voice.
A robot voice. And it's being played through a common guitar amplifier pressed directly against the shared concrete wall of your apartment.
By a neighbor.
By a neighbor who is methodically, patiently trying to steal everything you own.
It sounds like the plot of a dystopian science fiction thriller, right? Like It's sort of localized cyberpunk nightmare.
It really does. But what makes the material we are unpacking today so chilling is the sheer volume of bureaucratic, legal, and medical evidence backing it up.
Yeah, this isn't a theoretical concept at all. It's fully documented.
So our mission today is to unpack this highly detailed, deeply disturbing first-person account of organized property theft in Poland.
Right, focusing on these so-called prayer communities.
Yeah. And to understand how someone could almost lose their home, their assets, and their very identity to this kind of attack, we have to understand the weaponization of the mundane.
We have to look under the hood.
Exactly. First, we will decode the exact psychological mechanisms of influence these groups use.
How human biology physically reacts to overlapping frequencies of sound.
Right. Second, we will walk through a strict chronological timeline of one victim's 2-decade battle. And again, this is based entirely on their documented evidence, police recordings, and court files.
And finally, we will examine the specific Polish court judgments and the legal mechanisms involved in these property takeovers.
How it mutates into a neighborhood siege and ultimately ends up battling for survival in the highest courts in Warsaw.
It's a huge journey.
It is. And just as a quick heads up to you listening, the author's meticulous documentation dips into some incredibly polarizing stuff in Poland.
Yeah, very sensitive topics.
We're talking about complex religious dynamics, LGBT issues, and deeply ingrained social policies. Now, our goal today isn't to validate the politics or take a side on Polish social issues. We are here to act as forensic analysts on this text.
We are impartially reporting the documented experiences and assertions contained within the author's account.
Exactly. We are looking at the blueprints of the machine the author claims was built around them.
We are analyzing the architecture of a very specific kind of siege.
And the foundation of that siege isn't legal or physical, is it?
No, not at all. It is entirely psychological. The groups orchestrating this, the ones referred to in the text as prayer communities, they have completely abandoned the historical model of the cult.
Right, because when I think of a parareligious group or a cult, I immediately picture like a charismatic leader.
Yeah, the Jim Jones or Charles Manson archetype.
Exactly. Someone standing on a stage using sheer force of personality to draw people into an isolated compound out in the woods somewhere.
But that model is incredibly inefficient, and it's highly visible.
People notice when a compound gets built in the woods.
Exactly. What the source material describes here is an evolution. These prayer communities don't rely on isolating you in a commune.
Where do they isolate you?
They isolate you in your own apartment, right in the middle of a bustling city.
Wow.
And they don't rely on charisma. They rely on environmental conditioning and accessible, off-the-shelf technology.
The text-to-speech app? The guitar amplifier?
Right. The author describes a technique they call whisper talk, or, inside the group, personal prayer.
Personal prayer. That sounds so innocent.
It does. But the mechanism is brilliantly insidious. The abusers take a standard text-to-speech, or TTS, synthesizer.
Like the kind you can just download on your phone.
Exactly, just a basic app. They type out specific commands, anxieties, or religious directives, and they broadcast those synthetic voices through common amplifiers pressed against shared walls or floors.
Okay, wait, let me stop you right there.
Sure.
Because if my neighbor plays a robot voice through a guitar amp at 2 in the morning, I don't think, that's the voice of God.
Right, of course not.
I think, my neighbor is playing terrible avant-garde techno music and I'm calling the building manager.
Yeah, you'd just be annoyed.
Exactly. How on earth does a victim confuse an artificial synthesizer bleeding through drywall with their own internal intuition?
Well, if they just played a clean, clear robot voice into a quiet room, you would be absolutely right. The illusion would fail instantly.
It would just sound like a computer.
Exactly. But they don't do that. They play this synthetic, whispered voice buried underneath layers of loud, chaotic background noise.
Background noise, like what?
The source specifically mentions them using audio of stadium chants, massive crowds, or the aggressive sound of someone violently banging on a door.
Oh, wow. So they're layering the audio. The loud noise acts as a carrier wave or a mask for the whisper.
Yes. And that loud noise serves two massive physiological purposes.
Okay, what's the first one?
Pure biological stress.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. If you are sleeping and suddenly you are subjected to the muffled sound of a stadium crowd or aggressive banging.
You'd wake up terrified.
Exactly. Your body goes into an immediate fight or flight response. Your adrenal glands flood your system with cortisol.
Cortisol being the body's primary stress hormone.
Right. And while a short burst of cortisol is great for running away from a bear, chronic elevated cortisol is neurotoxic.
Wait, neurotoxic, like it actually poisons the brain.
It does. If you are subjected to this night after night, the sustained levels of cortisol physically damage your brain.
That is insane.
Specifically, it attacks the hippocampus, which is the region responsible for memory consolidation, learning, and spatial navigation.
So you are literally experiencing induced brain damage.
You are. The author details how this chronic stress induces a regressive, childlike state in the victim.
Because you can't form memories properly.
Because your attention narrows due to severe exhaustion, and your memory starts fracturing.
Yeah.
You become desperate for safety.
You just want it to start.
Exactly. You lose your adult critical thinking skills.
Yeah.
In this regressive state, the victim's subconscious frantically seeks out an anchor.
Like a lifeline.
Right. A parent figure, or in the context of these parareligious groups, a God figure for comfort and direction.
And the only anchor available in that chaotic audio soup is the whispered text-to-speech voice.
That's the only thing that sounds calm.
That is absolutely terrifying. You know, the author uses an analogy in the text that really helped me visualize this. They compare it to a stage prompter in a theater.
Oh, the person hiding out of sight, whispering the lines to the actors on stage.
Yes. The actors standing under blinding hot lights, they are sweating. There is a massive audience coughing and shifting in the dark.
Lots of environmental noise and stress.
Tons of it. But the actor is highly trained to completely tune out the audience and strain their ear to pick up the faint whispered voice of the prompter hidden in the floorboards.
And the victim is being conditioned to do the exact same thing.
Right. They are trained by the stress to seek out the quiet voice hidden inside the chaotic stadium chant. It's like a cyber attack. But instead of injecting malicious code into a computer network, they are injecting a Trojan horse into the victim's auditory processing system using ambient noise.
That's a perfect analogy. And this brings us to what I found to be the most fascinating, frankly, unexpected sociological detail in the entire source material.
The part about the television.
Yes, it explains exactly why some people are so incredibly susceptible to this specific acoustic trick, and conversely, why the author managed to survive it.
It all comes down to the cultural history of how people watch foreign television and films in Poland, right?
It does. It is such a unique cultural quirk.
You know, I was reading this section about the Polish voiceovers, and at first I didn't understand why the author included it in a dossier about organized crime. I honestly thought it was a tangent.
Seems like one, doesn't it?
Yeah, but then it clicked.
It is the linchpin of the entire psychological operation.
Explain how it works, because it's so different from how we watch movies in the West.
So in many Western countries, if you watch a foreign film, you are either reading subtitles or watching a fully dubbed version where actors match the lip movements.
Right.
But Poland has a deeply ingrained historical tradition of the voiceover lector.
The lectors. It's literally just one person reading the script over the movie.
Just one person, usually a man with a very deep, monotonous, soothing voice.
And he does all the voices.
He reads all the parts, men, women, children, without emoting at all. He simply delivers the translation.
Okay, but what about the actual sound of the movie?
That's the crucial part. The original audio track is not muted.
Wait, really?
Yeah, the original actor shouting, the explosions, the background music is all still playing at roughly 70% volume, and the lector's monotone voice is layered right over the top.
Okay, so if you grow up in this media environment, from the time you are a child watching cartoons to adulthood watching action movies, your brain is undergoing decades of highly specific neurological training.
Exactly. You are literally training your auditory processing center to listen to a primary monotonous voice while simultaneously hearing but actively ignoring a chaotic background audio track.
You are mastering selective auditory attention.
You are. The author argues that generations of people accustomed to this voiceover method are uniquely, deeply susceptible to a psychological manipulation technique known as the shotgun and servant paradox.
The shotgun and the servant. Walk me through that.
Okay, imagine a wealthy aristocrat walking through a chaotic, loud environment.
Okay.
His servant is walking right behind him, whispering his schedule to his ear.
Right.
Suddenly, a shotgun goes off nearby.
Boom.
Exactly. Now, a normal person would completely lose focus on the whisper and orient entirely toward the explosion.
Because it's a massive threatening noise.
Right. But the aristocrat's brain is so accustomed to tuning out the noise to hear the servant that they barely register the blast.
Oh, I see.
In this acoustic attack, the loud looping stadium chant is the shotgun. It's the distraction.
And the text-to-speech whisper is the servant.
Exactly, because the Polish listener's brain is already hardwired by the lector tradition to merge overlapping audio streams, to focus on the monotone voice while discarding the noise. The abusers can slip hidden commands right past the victim's conscious defenses.
So the conscious mind says, ugh, my neighbor is playing loud stadium noises again.
Right.
But the subconscious mind, trained by thousands of hours of watching television, zeroes in on the whisper buried underneath it and processes it as an authoritative command.
It is literal acoustic hacking.
But here is the massive variable in this equation. The reason we even have this document, the author didn't fall for it.
No, they didn't.
How did they avoid the conditioning?
The author survived precisely because their media consumption habits were different.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The text explicitly states that the author is multilingual and prefers to watch foreign films with subtitles in their original language.
So they didn't have the lector brain training.
Exactly. Their neural pathways hadn't been conditioned to merge conflicting audio tracks.
That is fascinating.
When the abusers turned on the guitar amplifier and tried to hide the synthetic whisper underneath the loud banging, the author didn't subconsciously merge them.
They just heard two different sounds.
They consciously heard two distinct, competing audio sources. They could clearly distinguish the separate tracks.
And instead of internalizing the synthetic voice as their own thought or as a divine message, they recognize the exact cadence of a commercial text-to-speech application playing over a low-fidelity speaker.
The magic trick completely fails when you see the wires.
Right. You see the wires. But this raises a massive problem for the victim and for the abusers. I mean, what happens if you realize what's going on?
It gets dangerous.
Yeah, if I realize my neighbor is trying to brainwash me through the drywall, I'm not going to submit to them. I'm going to become incredibly hostile.
You'd fight back.
I am going to buy my own amplifier, or I'm going to call the police. How do these groups handle a victim who rejects the audio conditioning? How does forced trust play into this?
Well, they demand absolute trust. And they handle rejection by relying on the fact that your reality now sounds completely insane to an outsider.
Okay, explain that.
If a victim reacts defensively, if they refuse to submit to the forced trust of the whisper talker, the abusers pivot to a secondary strategy that the author calls dog whistle tactics.
Dog whistle, meaning a signal that only a specific target can hear or understand, like a pitch only a dog can hear, while humans hear nothing.
Yes, but in this case, it's a psychological dog whistle. The abusers realize they can't break the author in the isolation of the apartment, so they take the harassment into the public sphere.
Wait, they follow them outside?
They begin following the victim into highly visible, mundane public spaces, the post office, the local grocery store, the hallway of the apartment building when other people are around.
And they bring the audio cues with them.
They do. They subtly trigger the victim using the exact same bizarre phrases, synthetic speech cadences, or rhythmic tapping they've been using to torture them at night.
So, imagine you are standing in line at the grocery store.
Right. Holding a basket of food.
You are already exhausted from sleep deprivation.
And a seemingly normal person, perhaps the neighbor who's been tormenting you, walks past you in the aisle and casually mutters a highly specific, nonsensical phrase.
Like what?
Let's say it's the phrase, "I bought the plot with your money," delivered in a robotic monotone.
That's the phrase they've been looping through the wall at 3 a.m. for a month?
Exactly.
If someone walks past me and says that, I am going to have a massive involuntary panic response. My heart rate is going to spike. I might shout at them. I might drop my basket.
You'd lose it.
I might start frantically trying to explain to the cashier that this person is stalking me.
And what does that look like to the cashier? What does it look like to the other shoppers in the store?
It looks like I am completely unhinged.
Yep. To everyone else, the neighbor just mumbled something harmless under their breath or maybe cleared their throat, and you just exploded into a violent paranoid rage for absolutely no reason.
You appear hypersensitive. You appear deeply paranoid.
You are acting out the symptoms of profound mental illness in public. The abusers have successfully weaponized your trauma against your reputation.
Wow.
The source material refers to this specific phase as the weaponization of asymptomatic schizophrenia.
Asymptomatic schizophrenia. Explain that terminology.
It means the victim is telling the absolute truth. If you say, "My neighbor is harassing me with synthetic voices using a guitar amplifier," you are reporting a factual event.
But it sounds crazy.
Exactly, because the methodology of the crime is so bizarre, so outside the realm of normal experience. The truth itself mimics the symptoms of a delusion.
The abusers know that if you go to the police or a doctor and tell the truth, the authorities will not investigate the neighbor.
They will investigate your sanity.
It is a self-sealing trap.
It is.
The crime is so absurd that reporting it discredits the victim, and that forces total isolation.
And once you are isolated, once the police think you're a nuisance and your family thinks you're having a breakdown, the actual objective can begin, the property theft.
Now that we understand the psychological weaponry, how these groups break down a victim's mind and isolate them from society, we can look at how this exact playbook was deployed against the author over a documented 20-year timeline.
Right, because knowing how a weapon works is different from seeing it fired.
And it is crucial to remind ourselves here. Every single event we are discussing from this timeline is sourced directly from the author's provided evidence.
It's all backed up.
We are talking about police intervention recordings, official court transcripts, stamped legal motions, and medical files. This isn't just someone's theoretical diary.
This is the paper trail of an attempted erasure.
Let's construct the chronological narrative of this siege. Let's start the early days, the foundation of the threat, a period spanning roughly 2003 to 2019.
So the author points to the early 2000s, specifically 2003 and 2005, as the genesis of the conflict.
Okay, what happened then?
They cite a religious prosecutor from Krakow who was involved in case 3DS4205.
A religious prosecutor.
Yes. The author seems to view this early period not as an immediate attack, but as the planting of a seed.
Like establishing a baseline of legal friction.
Exactly. It put the author on the group's radar, and created a nebulous pretext for future compensation claims by the community.
But a seed needs a specific environment to grow. It took over a decade for the group to build the infrastructure necessary to actually move against the author.
And that infrastructure was built by exploiting another incredibly potent cultural archetype in Poland.
The mommy cult.
Over the 2010s, the author observed the rise of this within the prayer communities.
The matka Polka. The Polish mother.
Yes.
It's a very specific cultural image of romanticized martyrdom, isn't it?
Yeah.
The selfless mother who sacrifices everything for her children and her family, often enduring immense suffering without complaint.
It is an archetype that is deeply, deeply respected by society. And because it is respected, it is the perfect camouflage for a predator.
How do they use it?
The source material outlines how the leaders of these parareligious groups actively profile and groom women who fit a specific vulnerability profile to play this role.
What does that vulnerability profile look like? Who are they looking for?
They look for women who are trapped in complex, often abusive domestic situations.
Ah, okay.
Perhaps a single mother struggling financially, or a woman locked in a deeply codependent dynamic with an alcoholic husband or father.
So women who are already living in a state of high stress.
Exactly. And the author notes a crucial detail here. Years of domestic trauma often result in heightened sensory perception.
Because they have to be careful.
Right. These women become hyper-vigilant to the moods and sounds of the men in their lives to anticipate abuse.
Which ironically makes them incredibly sensitive to the audio conditioning techniques we discussed earlier. They are already primed to listen for subtle cues in their environment.
Exactly. The prayer communities sweep in and offer these women a profound sense of safety, community, and divine purpose.
They give them what they're missing.
And then they isolate them from outside influences, build an unbreakable bond of forced trust, and condition them using the whisper talk.
So they train them to recognize and obey the community leader's voice implicitly.
Yes.
So they basically turn the victim into a willing proxy. But why do they need the mommy figure? I mean, if the leaders want money, why don't they just steal it themselves?
Because the mommy has legal access to her family's wealth,
Oh.
and she provides the ultimate social shield. Once the psychological control is established, the leader instructs the groomed woman to begin accumulating and transferring her family's assets, real estate, bank accounts, inheritances over to the community.
And if anyone in the family or the neighborhood questions it,
The group just points to the cultural archetype.
how dare you question her? She is a devoted mother doing what is best for her family's spiritual well-being.
It silences criticism immediately.
That is sickening.
The author asserts that the true criminals use these highly vulnerable women as human shields. The women are doing the heavy lifting of the theft, convinced it is a divine mandate, while the community leaders reap the financial rewards without ever getting their hands dirty.
It is a brilliant, sickeningly efficient system. But for our author, just observing this slow accumulation from the periphery wasn't enough for the abusers.
No, the conflict eventually escalated.
It breached the threshold of physical violence in 2019. The author documents a break-in and theft at their own property.
And this incident in 2019 is vital because it reveals the extent of the institutional rot.
What happened with the police?
When a break-in occurs, the standard procedure is to call emergency services.
Right.
The author did. The police arrived, 4 uniformed officers in total.
But according to the author's meticulous documentation and later court testimony, the law enforcement mechanism had already been compromised.
One of the responding officers wasn't just a cop. He was an active member of the very prayer community orchestrating the neighborhood harassment.
Wait, what?
He was on both sides of the chessboard.
That is unbelievable.
Instead of securing the scene, arresting the intruders, and taking a statement from the victim, this officer engaged in a bizarre, hour-long negotiation with the perpetrators right in front of the author.
He's acting as a mediator for a burglary.
Yes. And the author notes that during subsequent legal proceedings, one of the perpetrators actually admitted on the record that they knew the officer personally.
So the police force, in that specific moment, was neutralized from the inside.
Completely neutralized.
Which forces us to look at the turning point of this entire narrative. We are moving from 2021 into early 2022. Up until now, the author thought they were dealing with a property dispute, right?
Yeah, just a group of overly aggressive religious neighbors trying to expand their footprint.
But in 2021, the author discovers that this is a much darker, highly organized criminal enterprise. The author officially reports to district prosecutors in the Ochota and Wola districts of Warsaw that 2 apartments in their building are being used for forced prostitution.
And the administrative detail regarding those apartments is what ties the entire conspiracy together.
Who owned them?
Those 2 apartments did not belong to the people operating them. They formerly belonged to deceased citizens.
Oh, wow.
They've been quietly taken over and were now being managed by a taxi driver neighbor, a man named Bogdan S., who the author identifies as a key operative in the harassment campaign.
So the timeline looks like this. The group targets vulnerable or isolated individuals. When those people die or are moved into care facilities, the group quietly assumes control of the real estate.
They bypass the legal inheritance process entirely.
They turn the apartments into hourly brothels to generate cash flow and rely on the systemic apathy of the police to ignore it.
Exactly.
And when the author tries to blow the whistle on this operation to the prosecutors,
The group realizes the author is an existential threat to their revenue stream.
they can't just harass the author anymore.
They have to eliminate the threat. By February 2022, the psychological tactics escalate into overt violence.
The author documents being physically attacked inside their own apartment.
And the attackers don't just threaten to beat the author. They deliver explicit death threats.
Stating they will murder the author and hide the body where it will never be found.
Right. And the author has the presence of mind to record this. They have the audio of the death threats.
They take this hard evidence directly to the local police officer, and what happens?
Nothing. The police refuse to intervene. No arrests are made. No protective orders are issued.
Which is mind-boggling.
It is.
And that lack of intervention brings us to the climax of the conspiracy, the physical siege, a highly compressed, incredibly intense window between September and November of 2022.
The group realizes that physical intimidation isn't working. The author isn't fleeing. So they decide to pivot to a strategy of total legal erasure.
We have documented proof of this pivot.
Yes. The author provides records of the events in early September, September 5th and September 8th, 2022.
What happens on those dates?
The prayer community sets a concrete, multi-stage plan into motion. And the events of September 8th involve a recorded police intervention that perfectly encapsulates the terrifying fusion of psychological control and institutional failure.
Let's break down that September 8th intervention. The police arrive at the building again, and this time they're wearing body cameras.
The audio from these cameras is critical evidence.
Right.
During this intervention, a neighbor identified in the documentation as Mrs. Christina is present in the hallway.
Okay.
Without being addressed by the officers, she begins speaking. But if you analyze the audio closely, you realize she isn't having a conversation.
What is she doing?
She is acting as a human repeater. She is mimicking whispered commands that are being played through a guitar amplifier from another floor in the building.
It's the stage prompter technique happening in real time in front of law enforcement.
She robotically repeats the phrase, "I bought the plot with your money."
The exact phrase.
She is demonstrating the success of the acoustic conditioning while the police are standing right there. But the scene devolves even further.
How could it get worse?
The author notes that another police officer on the scene, an officer wearing, inexplicably, historical insignia associated with a religious massacre, begins actively participating in the acoustic harassment.
Wait, the cop joins in.
The officer begins banging on the author's door, but not with the standard police knock. He bangs on the door to the exact rhythmic cadence of a well-known football stadium chant.
He is providing the loud, chaotic carrier wave for the whispered audio conditioning.
Yes.
It is synchronized technological harassment aided and abetted by a uniformed officer on body cam video. It is surreal.
He really is.
And just 2 weeks after this bizarre display in the hallway on September 22, 2022, the real legal attack begins.
The group moves from the hallway into the courtroom. Utilizing proxies, they officially file a motion to strip the author of their property rights.
They petition the court for what is known as legal incapacitation.
Right. Legal incapacitation is the process by which the state declares you mentally unfit to manage your own affairs.
Which transfers control of your assets, your medical decisions, and your living arrangements to a court-appointed proxy.
And the justification they wrote down on the official court filing is staggering.
Did they invent a medical history?
No. They didn't even attempt to invent compelling medical history. They didn't cite a history of violence.
What did they write?
They literally wrote on the motion, he has no wife, no children, no acquaintances or friends.
They are essentially telling the judge, this person is entirely isolated, no one will notice if he disappears. His assets are unprotected and easy to divide.
They put that predatory logic in writing.
seemingly fully confident that the bureaucratic machine would simply rubber stamp the request without looking too closely.
And the terrifying part is, the machine almost did exactly that. By November 2022, the court had scheduled a closed session to assess the property.
A judge and court-appointed psychiatric experts were scheduled to show up at the author's apartment.
To conduct an evaluation and potentially hand control of the estate over to the community before Christmas.
And the author was completely blind to this.
Completely.
They didn't even know a legal motion had been filed against them. How is that possible?
They were blind because the group had compromised the final line of communication between the author and the state, the Postal Service.
Oh my God.
Postal workers affiliated with the prayer community had been systematically intercepting and hiding the author's official court mail.
We will dig into the horrific legal implications of that mail theft in a minute, but thankfully, the author was tipped off by strangers, right?
Yeah, bystanders who somehow realized what was happening, just days before the judge was scheduled to arrive.
Giving the author barely enough time to file a desperate formal protest with the court.
And while the author is frantically trying to navigate the legal system to stop this ambush, the neighbors escalate the psychological torture.
What do they do?
They literally start banging on the shared walls and mimicking ghost noises, trying to trigger a mental breakdown before the psychiatric evaluators arrive.
I have to interject here because, we've all had bad neighbors. We've all dealt with a loud stereo or a barking dog.
Sure.
But the sheer scale of the institutional blindness required for this operation to function is staggering.
It's massive.
It sounds like the victim isn't just fighting a single malicious taxi driver or local cult. They are fighting the Polish post office, the police force, the medical establishment, and the judiciary simultaneously.
That's exactly what it feels like.
How does a massive modern state apparatus allow itself to be hijacked by a neighborhood prayer group?
Well, it doesn't happen through a grand, smoke-filled room conspiracy where everyone agrees to be evil.
Right.
It happens through a well-documented psychological phenomenon called diffused responsibility.
Diffused responsibility. I've heard the term in relation to bystander apathy, but how does it work as a mechanism for organized crime?
So when you take a horrific outcome, like destroying a person's life and stealing their home, and you break that crime down into tiny, highly disconnected administrative tasks, the moral weight of the crime evaporates.
Okay.
No single person in the chain feels responsible for the ultimate outcome.
Okay, so the postal worker who intercepts a letter from the court.
That postal worker doesn't think, I am destroying a man's life. He thinks I am just misplacing one piece of paper as a favor to my community.
Wow. And the police officer?
The police officer who ignores the death threats thinks, I am just prioritizing my paperwork today. I'm not aiding an assault.
And the medical expert?
The medical expert who writes a hasty, inaccurate psychiatric evaluation without meeting the patient thinks, I'm just clearing my desk of a routine consultation. I'm not declaring someone legally incompetent.
So everyone takes a tiny, seemingly harmless bite out of the victim's rights. It's an assembly line of abuse.
Precisely. No single person on that assembly line views themselves as a murderer, a thief, or a cult member.
They're just following a micro-instruction or looking the other way for a moment.
But when you aggregate all of those tiny, deliberate institutional failures, the result is the complete systemic destruction of an individual's life.
And that assembly line of diffused responsibility ultimately deposited the author straight into the courtroom. The physical harassment failed. The psychological conditioning failed. Now, the author had to face the legal battlefield.
The legal machinery.
Right. How exactly did the Polish legal system handle this orchestrated attempt to turn a living citizen into a ghost on paper? Let's dive specifically into the documented examples of the Polish judgments mentioned in the source material.
This is where the source material transitions from a survival narrative into a deep analysis of legal weaponization. The author provides exhaustive, granular detail on the specific legal mechanisms used in case the Vic ends 2622.
Which was held in the district court for Warsaw.
Right. This case was the primary vehicle used by the group, spearheaded by the taxi driver Bogdan S., to execute the theft.
And the first massive hurdle the author had to face wasn't even the judge's gavel. It was the missing mail we just talked about.
A mail sabotage.
The author had to fight a legal doctrine that is so Kafkaesque, it's hard to believe it exists in a modern democracy. It's a concept called the fiction of delivery.
Yes. In Polish law, it is often referred to as doraczny zaszczyt.
Doraczny zaszczyt? Okay, what is that?
It is a standard bureaucratic mechanism designed to keep the wheels of justice turning. I mean, if courts had to physically hand every single letter to every single defendant and prove they read it, the legal system would grind to a halt.
People would just dodge the mailman to avoid lawsuits.
Exactly. That makes sense in theory.
So how does the law solve that?
It creates a legal fiction. The law states that if the post office attempts to deliver a court summons and leaves a notice, and you do not pick up that letter from the post office within a strict time frame, usually 14 days, the court legally assumes the letter was delivered.
It assumes you read it.
The state declares that you received it, read it, and simply chose not to respond. And in the legal world, missing a deadline or ignoring a summons is legally equivalent to consenting to the demands in the letter.
So if you don't reply, you lose by default.
You lose by default.
Which means if an organized group can control your mailbox, they control your legal reality.
Exactly. The group weaponized this doctrine flawlessly. The author documented that postal workers affiliated with the Prayer Fellowship systematically hid the court letters.
Wait, systematically? Like how many letters are we talking about here?
Over 200 court letters from him.
200 pieces of official correspondence simply vanished.
200 just vanished.
I mean, the author is sitting in his apartment, completely unaware that multiple legal battles are raging around him because the mail never arrives.
And the court is sitting in its chamber, looking at a stack of unreturned letters, thinking, well, this person isn't defending themselves. They must agree with the motion to incapacitate them.
The author had to engage in a Herculean effort of documentation to combat this, didn't he?
He had to. He couldn't just say he didn't get the mail. He had to prove a negative.
How do you do that?
He recorded postal employees explicitly refusing to hand over his mail. He documented bizarre instances where letters addressed to complete strangers were stuffed into his mailbox to create a chaotic paper trail.
He had to obsessively catalog every single anomaly.
Because if he had not, the court would have applied the fiction of delivery, assumed he was ignoring the summons, and stripped his rights immediately.
He forced his way into the courtroom by sheer force of documentation. But once he got into the actual hearing room, the attack simply shifted from the mailroom to his character.
The character assassination in court.
The author describes the very first hearing of case the 50 ends 13622, and the tactics used by the group's legal counsel are a masterclass in manipulation.
The lawyer representing the prayer community used an insidious tactic to pollute the legal record. In her opening motions, she included a quote from a commercially published book written by a judge.
Wait, a book that had absolutely nothing to do with the author, the apartment, or the case at hand?
Nothing at all.
Why would she submit a random book, quote, as evidence?
Because that specific quote contained highly inflammatory terms. It discussed people who were drug addicts and alcoholics.
Ah.
By inserting that quote into her motion, she was able to sneak those devastating words into the official, permanent legal record of the author's case.
But she didn't accuse the author directly.
No, because if she had directly stated the author is an alcoholic, the author could demand she produce medical evidence, or he could sue her for defamation and slander.
But by citing a published book?
She planted those concepts into the judge's mind without making a direct, actionable accusation. She tied the scent of addiction to the author's file with zero accountability.
And she didn't stop there.
No, she didn't.
The author notes that within minutes of this first hearing, the lawyer also deliberately referred to him using an initial or phrasing that implied he was homosexual.
Again, we are looking at the weaponization of the social climate. In the highly polarized, deeply traditional societal backdrop of Poland that the author describes, merely introducing the suggestion of homosexuality isn't an accident.
It is a calculated attempt to trigger inherent biases. The goal isn't to prove a fact. The goal is to make the author an other.
Yes. To signal to a potentially conservative judge or court official that this person is outside the traditional family structure and therefore perhaps less worthy of the court's sympathy or protection.
It is the ultimate extension of their initial written justification. He has no wife, no children. They are isolating him socially inside the courtroom, just as they isolated him acoustically in his apartment.
And once they felt they had sufficiently eroded his character, they brought in the medical experts.
We have specific dates for this crucial phase. The hearings on March 28th and June 27th, 2024.
The court appoints a psychiatric expert to evaluate the author's mental state to determine if he should be incapacitated.
And the testimony this expert delivers is a textbook example of institutional gaslighting.
The expert testifies under oath that the author is exhibiting symptoms of mental illness.
And the primary symptom cited:
The author's lack of trust in his neighbors.
Let's just sit with the dark, Kafkaesque irony of that for a moment. A highly organized group of people is actively trying to steal your home.
Yeah,
They are using text-to-speech synthesizers pressed against your wall to induce brain damage. They are intercepting your mail. They have threatened to murder you. And the state-appointed psychiatrist tells the judge that you are legally insane because you do not trust these people.
it is the trap of asymptomatic schizophrenia snapping shut in a court of law.
Mm.
The expert viewed the author's highly rational, survival-based hypervigilance as paranoia.
But the author didn't have a lawyer, did he?
No, he was representing himself.
So he cross-examined the state expert directly.
And that cross-examination broke the case open. Under direct questioning by the author, the expert's facade completely crumbled.
What happened?
The expert was forced to admit on the official record that he actually possessed zero qualifications in the specific medical subfield required to evaluate the author's condition.
He was unqualified to make the diagnosis he had just given.
Furthermore, when confronted with the author's documentation of the acoustic harassment and the missing mail, the expert retracted his entire psychiatric evaluation within minutes.
He just took it back.
He completely withdrew his assertion that the author was mentally ill.
Oh, never mind, my mistake. He's not crazy.
Just like that.
But the terrifying reality is that the court had already been operating based on this deeply flawed, potentially malicious medical advice for months.
Which leads us to what is arguably the most horrific, chilling detail in the entire dossier.
The lethal prescription.
Yes. Amidst the mountain of legal filings, the court documents officially listed a specific highly potent medication as part of the author's medical record or proposed treatment plan.
But the author reviewed this document and realized something was profoundly wrong.
The author cross-referenced the medication listed by the court with their own actual verified medical history.
And what did they find?
They discovered that administering that specific substance would not have treated any condition. According to their medical profile, it would have caused immediate, catastrophic biological failure.
It would have been instantly fatal.
Yes.
The court had to issue a formal apology, claiming it was a clerical mistake, a typo in the name of the drug.
The author, however, views it through a much darker lens. They posit that this was not a typographical error. It was a deliberate attempt at legal murder.
Okay, explain how that mechanism would work. How do you legally murder someone with a typo?
Think about the timeline we just discussed. If the court had successfully incapacitated the author based on the unread mail and the fake psychiatric report, control of the author's medical decisions would have transferred to a court-appointed proxy.
Likely someone affiliated with the prayer community.
Exactly. That proxy would then authorize medical treatment based on the court's official file.
So the lethal medication, blessed by the court's typo, would be administered by a nurse or doctor simply following orders.
The author would die, and no one goes to jail. The nurse was following the chart. The proxy was following the court order. The judge was relying on the medical expert.
Diffused responsibility strikes again.
A perfect crime, executed entirely on paper.
But the author didn't let the paper dictate their reality. They fought it at every single junction. They recorded the police interventions. They tracked the missing mail. They cross-examined the fake experts.
And eventually, the sheer weight of their evidence forced the machine to halt.
What was the ultimate judgment?
After 2 agonizing years of psychological torture and legal warfare, the District Court for Warsaw officially dismissed the motion to strip the author of their property rights.
They won.
When forced to confront the undeniable documented proof of the acoustic conditioning and the systemic sabotage, the system finally worked.
The court formally ruled that the author's behavior, specifically his refusal to trust a parareligious group and his ability to consciously recognize their text-to-speech conditioning, did not constitute a mental disorder according to the World Health Organization guidelines.
He successfully defended the perimeter of his mind.
And by doing so, he kept his physical home. But reading this, I can't help but feel a profound sense of dread, because I have to ask, what does this mean for the concept the author calls ghosts on paper?
It's a grim thought.
This one person survived. But they only survived because they were highly educated, spoke multiple languages, understood the physics of acoustic conditioning, possessed the stamina to battle a bureaucracy for years, and obsessively documented every single second of their life.
It's an impossibly high bar.
If that is the barrier to survival, how many others didn't make it? How many vulnerable people have simply vanished into this system?
That is the dark, lingering reality of this deep dive. The concept of ghosts on paper is the ultimate goal of these property theft rings.
What exactly is a ghost on paper?
A ghost on paper is an individual who's been successfully, legally incapacitated. Once that judicial stamp hits the paper, their physical presence, their voice, their desires, none of it is required by the state anymore.
They cease to exist as a legal entity.
They exist only as a file, represented by their proxies. Lawyers, distant family members groomed by the community, or the group leaders themselves.
And once those proxies have control, they can legally sign away property deeds, liquidate bank accounts, and alter wills.
Or, as the author pointed out with the 2 apartments in their building, they can use the assets for further criminal enterprise.
The forced prostitution rings.
Right. The victim themselves might be locked away in an underfunded psychiatric institution, heavily medicated to ensure compliance, or they might even be dead.
But their legal avatar, the ghost on paper, continues to exist, silently signing documents and transferring generational wealth to their abusers.
The author survived because they refused to become a ghost. They documented the dropped letters, the whispered threats in the grocery store, and the forged medical diagnoses.
But the chilling truth is that the vast machinery built to consume them, that massive assembly line of abuse, is still fully operational.
Yes, it is. The postal workers who intercepted the mail still have their routes.
The police officer who banged on the door to the rhythm of the stadium chant still wears a badge.
The taxi driver is still managing the apartments in the building.
The architecture of mind control and organized property theft remains completely intact. The author didn't destroy the machine, they merely managed to fortify their own walls enough to survive it.
It is a profound testament to the power of meticulous documentation and a terrifying reminder of what happens when you refuse to submit to forced trust.
I want you, listening to this, to reflect on the fragility of your own reality for a second. We all rely on a massive, invisible safety net every single day of our lives.
We take it for granted.
We do. You rely on the basic assumption that when a letter is sent to you, the post office will deliver it. You rely on the assumption that if someone breaks into your home and you call emergency services, the police will arrive to protect you, not to negotiate a settlement with the burglar.
You rely on doctors and medical experts to tell the truth about your biological and mental health.
Your entire existence in a modern society is predicated on the unquestioned assumption that the vast institutions surrounding you are acting in good faith.
What happens when that safety net is quietly weaponized against you?
It's a terrifying question. And before we go, I want to leave you with one final macro-level concept to mull over.
Okay.
We have spent this entire deep dive analyzing how localized groups use relatively crude audio technology, guitar amps and smartphone text-to-speech apps combined with systemic bureaucratic apathy to break down an individual's mind and steal their life.
Right, localized in one building.
But imagine this exact same playbook operating on a global scale. We are entering an era where deepfakes, flawlessly AI-generated voices, and hyper-personalized algorithmic conditioning are becoming seamlessly integrated into our daily digital background noise.
It's a chilling thought.
Exactly. If a neighbor pressing a guitar amp against a concrete wall can almost successfully erase a human life using a robotic monotone voice, what happens when the prompter whispering in your ear isn't a taxi driver in Warsaw, but a highly advanced algorithm?
An algorithm that knows your exact search history, your deepest anxieties, and the exact tone of voice required to bypass your critical thinking.
How long until the shotgun and servant techniques used by this prayer community aren't just an anomaly in a Polish apartment building, but a standard invisible feature of the digital world we all live in?
When the synthetic voice doesn't come through the wall, but through your own headphones, that is the truly invisible breach.
Thank you so much for joining us on this intense deep dive. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and we'll see you next time.